second city, Benghazi, in the east. Jackie, lots of reports lately of Gaddafi forces trying to retake towns in the east, including Brega, which is a small but very strategic town. How nervous are people where you are about a Gaddafi offensive?
Well, when I first heard news of this counter-offensive by pro-Gaddafi forces, I have to say that the messenger was extremely agitated. A fighter came running into the square here bearing an AK-47, very agitated, shouting at people, "What are you doing standing around here? The Gaddafi forces are attacking. We need to be ready to fight them back." The information we're getting now from the provisional authorities here in Benghazi is that pro-Gaddafi forces have indeed recaptured the town of Al-Bareqa, which is about 200 kilometers down the road towards the southwest, basically along the coast in the direction of Tripoli. We're also hearing that aircraft loyal to Gaddafi have carried out a bombing raid against a weapons store about 6 kilometers outside the very important town of AlJazeera. Now, to give you a sense of how important these towns are, Al-Bareqa, which has reportedly fallen to pro-Gaddafi forces, it's a very important oil and natural gas production and refining centre. AlJazeera, a very important big town, about 250,000 people. Apparently, we're being told that the inhabitants of the town are now moving to the edges of the city, waiting to see whether the pro-Gaddafi forces march on the town. They say that they're taking up positions, preparing to defend the town. But were AlJazeera to fall to the pro-Gaddafi forces, that would be a serious setback and a major challenge to this uprising, since AlJazeera is only 140 kilometers away from Benghazi. Benghazi, the capital of the uprising, the headquarters both politically and militarily for anti-Gaddafi forces. The top priority for people here now is to defend this city, to reinforce this city, to absolutely do all they can to ensure that Benghazi does not fall.
And that was going to be my next question, in fact, Jackie. How well prepared are they in Benghazi for a Gaddafi counter-offensive? Do they have what it takes to repel the Gaddafi forces?
Strategically, this has been their priority. I spoke to a senior rebel commander a couple of days ago. He made it quite clear that defending Benghazi, reinforcing Benghazi, is their #1 priority. I've seen in the last couple of days hundreds of men coming to volunteer to fight against Gaddafi. At the time, there was a lot of rhetoric about marching towards Tripoli. I think at the moment, if those forces are called upon, they're going to be called upon to defend the city. I have to say, in terms of hardware folly, it's not a very pretty picture. They do have a number of tanks, nothing like the hundreds, I think, that some rebel commanders have been boasting of. And in terms of aircraft, you can forget it. I've seen very old Soviet fighter aircraft from the 1980s, rusty, flat tires, stuck to the tarmac. So in terms of military forces, the rebels certainly have a big challenge ahead of them.
What about the Gaddafi forces, Jackie? Of course, a number in the army have deserted and basically have defected from the Gaddafi army. How well equipped are the Gaddafi forces as they try to retake these strategic towns in the east?
Look, the Gaddafi forces have all the means at their disposal that the Gaddafi army had prior to this uprising, but we have to bear in mind that Muammar Gaddafi had made a strategic decision some years ago to scale back the army as an important fighting force. You have to remember that he emerged from the army himself as a young officer who carried out a military coup back in 1969. I think he was very aware that what he did back then could in fact happen to him, and that was why he scaled back the army. He has put all the emphasis on investing in his own security brigades. That is where the investment has been, so that is where the military strength has been. The question now is whether he will in fact learn to regret that decision if in fact the army isn't as well equipped as it could be. However, at the moment he has one major strategic advantage over the rebel forces, and that is air power. The rebels really, they're not able to go up in the air. Gaddafi, we've seen him carry out bombing raids, and of course the power that has air superiority inevitably has a huge advantage.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. Jackie Rowland reporting live from Benghazi in eastern Libya. Meanwhile, the international community is stepping up its action on Libya. The United Nations has issued its strongest condemnation of Muammar Gaddafi's regime and suspended Libya from its Human Rights Council. Scott Heidler has more on that story.
The United Nations General Assembly suspended Libya from the Human Rights Council on Tuesday. They cited violence by the government there, and specifically in the resolution that was passed, said gross and systemic violations of human rights by the Gaddafi regime. Now, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon addressed the body of 192 nations concerned about the situation in the country.
We meet today on a crisis marked by ongoing violence amid a growing humanitarian emergency and a political situation that could quickly deteriorate further. Meeting in emergency session over the weekend, the Security Council acted with unanimity and decisiveness. I welcome as well the strong statements from many international leaders and organizations, the League of Arab States, the African Union, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, and the European Union.
Permanent members of the powerful Security Council saying that they are holding consultations with other members on possible next steps by the United Nations, saying nothing is off the table, but the idea of a no-fly zone is becoming less likely.
Meanwhile, 2 U.S. Navy ships are being positioned closer to Libya. The USS Kearsarge and the USS Ponce are passing through the Suez Canal en route to the Mediterranean Sea. U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates says they're to be used for humanitarian efforts, and no decision's been made on any other type of action. Well, Libya's unrest is continuing to cause headaches for its neighbors, Tunisia in particular. Aid workers say the refugee situation at the border has reached crisis point. James Bates sent this report from the Libyan-Tunisian border.
It is a place of chaos and misery. These people have been trying to flee the violence in Libya for over a week, and now they find themselves packed in a crowd that continues to grow.
At the beginning, we went to the airport and saw the huge crowds outside it. Then I decided to take the road to Tunisia, and I have been stuck here for 4 days now.
For days, the situation here has been getting worse, and it appears that things now are at breaking point. Neither the Tunisian authorities or the international observers here know exactly how many people are on the other side of the border, but it's clear their numbers are growing and the conditions are getting worse by the hour.
We watched as doctors treated those who'd collapsed. After days trying to escape from Libya, they're suffering from dehydration and exhaustion.
It is a humanitarian emergency and a humanitarian situation. There are right now some 70,000 persons who have crossed the border since the beginning of this crisis, since the 20th. Yesterday alone, we witnessed a significant increase. Some 14,000 people crossed in 12 hours, the highest since the beginning.
Tunisian aid workers try to help those on the other side of a frontier they're not allowed to cross. Bottles of water and loaves of bread thrown over the fence. But other Tunisians exert control using force. These are not officials, but local citizens who've armed themselves with wooden clubs. Some of those who finally make it across